we're going to be having the conversation with the Director General of the National Institute of Statistics, Rwanda, Dr. Ivan Murenzi, who's just going to give us an analysis of how the economy fared in 2024. And we'll also be looking at what trends to look at, what to expect, and also risks, especially looking at the periods that we're in, everything that is happening globally, how is it trickling down to the Rwandan economy. Thank you so much, Dr. Ivan, for making time to speak to us. Always a pleasure having conversations with you. When you look at the year 2024, how would you gauge the economic performance?
Thank you for having me. I think the year 2024 has generally been a positive year in all aspects, especially comparing to the previous year, 2023, and the years before then. As you can recall, we had quite a low period of 2020 with the COVID. And since then, the economy has been on a good trajectory of recovery. And specifically for 2024, we had stable inflation, actually low inflation, maybe averaging to about 4.6% so far the last 11 months, compared to an average of, I think, about 7.7 for 2023. And the year before then, inflation was high. We had months where inflation was about 20% in 2022. So inflation matters because it erodes the economic capacities of people. When inflation is high, it affects the purchasing power of people. So that's the key factor in this year, that inflation has generally been low and stable. But also employment. Unemployment around 2021, 2020 had risen to about over 20% unemployment rate. That's the highest we had ever recorded. But since then, the economy has been recovering, more businesses coming up and functioning, and unemployment rate has now stabilized to pre-COVID periods. By Q3, we had about 15.1% unemployment rate. For Q3, we had 15.3%, coming from a period where it was 18, 20. So that means a lot in terms of jobs being available, unemployment coming down, but also, as I said, inflation being low. All that combined has an effect on well-being of people. And then we see that also in GDP performance, where just around COVID, GDP growth was negative and started recovering, and now we are talking of over 7% growth for the last 2 years. So 2024 in particular, compared to the previous years, has generally been a positive year.
2024, even when we had the previous conversation, it was around towards the end of March, and we were looking at how the economy at large has been affected by geopolitical tensions that were happening, looking at the imported risks, and inflation numbers. 2023, they were relatively high. So as much as 2024, the trend has been positive, how would you say the cycles we've experienced in the past, how have they impacted consumer behavior? How have they even impacted the business activities at large?
Yeah, so inflation in Rwanda is affected by agriculture. That's one key part. If agriculture does well, if agriculture productivity goes very well, then there will be more supply of food crops on the market, which will lead to stable prices or fair prices. Because for most households, the biggest percentage of their spending is on food, so food matters. Now, when agriculture does not perform well and we have low productivity, so what comes on the market is less, prices go high. And given that for most households, the biggest percentage of their spending is on food, then they are greatly affected. But as you rightly put it, there are other effects beyond agriculture's performance domestic. So, for example, if we have shocks in global supply of fuel, that will have an effect on the price at which fuel comes in the country, which affects transport costs, which affects other products and services which have to be moved around. So that's another one. Fuel, energy is another key aspect that can affect inflation, and we've seen those challenges globally that have caused fluctuations in energy prices, and we have felt that. There are other key inputs also which we import, namely when it comes to agriculture, fertilizers. Fertilizers as a key input into production of agriculture. We had a shock where with the wars in Ukraine, which was the main supplier of fertilizers, that was a big effect to agriculture productivity. And we look back and we see in 2020, 2021 and 2022 that really affected the inputs, the availability of inputs, namely fertilizers, and that also affected productivity. So yes, global shocks do have an effect for any country, but for some countries like ours, which still import a lot, those prices have a big translation to our well-being. But I think for 2024, we could say there's been recovery among for various things, and that also added with stability in agriculture. It has helped stabilize things when it comes to prices, but also when it comes to performance of the sector like agriculture, which is a key sector.
Okay. When you say we've seen the economic performance has been on a positive trajectory, inflation within the threshold, what does that mean for the average person? How do we translate that?
Yeah, I think that's a key question to the average person. First, with agriculture, for me it's a key one. If you have good production, the farmer who has produced more will have what they consume, so they have sufficient consumption for themselves, but they will be able also to sell the surplus, and so there's added income to themselves. Overall, that means a lot for many households. Now, to the one who does not do farming, what's coming, there's variety coming to the market in terms of food crops, and so the cost of those food crops will also be reasonable to them, and that allows them to have extra to spend on other things. So the good performance of agriculture matters a lot for food security, general well-being of people, and ability to have extra for the big percentage that are involved in agriculture to spend on other things. Now, when also other economic activities are growing, let's say investors are deploying their resources, or expansion, other businesses are growing. Actually, one of the key researches we do or surveys is called the Establishment Enterprise Survey. But we also do what's called the Establishment Census, an enumeration of all businesses, establishments, every 3 years. And what we saw, the last one we had done was in 2020, and in 2023 we did another one, and we saw a 16% growth in the number of establishments, private establishments. So when you see more micro, small, medium, and large establishments open or grow, expand, that's growth for the economy, but more importantly, they are creating jobs. They are creating jobs for people. And so that's really the translation. So one is on food availability and the relative cost of food being stable, which allows extra to be spent on other things or saved for investment, but also more businesses establishing, whether in services, whether in industry, whether in agriculture, creates more jobs for people. And overall, the growth is therefore a very positive thing. But also for the government, growth means more opportunities for tax revenue, because as more businesses open up, there's more opportunity for tax. Or as more businesses grow, expand, their turnovers go higher, and so the government is able to collect more taxes, which can be deployed for public goods.
Mm-hmm. And just even sticking to a point that you've mentioned on job creation, how have we seen the labor market evolve over the years, and also in particular this year, looking at the rates in which we're seeing employment growth, and even a conversation that has been on the airwaves recently regarding pensions? We've seen people also bring up the whole point on wages. How have we seen it evolving?
Well, I could speak of, so the primary concern is always people to have a job. You want to have a situation where unemployment rates are very low. There's no situation like you have zero unemployment, even in the developed countries. There's going always to be a given level of people who are not employed. But the question is, what's the reasonable level? So for developed countries, you talk of inflation rates about 5% and below. For developing countries like Rwanda, that's not a realistic expectation because we have not reached that level. So then, if you have levels between 10 to 15% unemployment, that's manageable, but your aim is to bring it even lower, okay? Because the bigger percentage of people who are unemployed, the higher dependency ratio. But it's a loss to the productivity of the economy because those people, those resources are not being deployed. Whichever skill they have, as long as they are working, they're adding value. So when it comes to employment, for me, the main focus is to see how many people have access to jobs. And when we say 15.3% unemployment, we're talking of the total population. When you talk of youth unemployment, it's higher. It's about 20%. Now, I think the government's focus is to see how there are more opportunities created for people to work. Now, once people have an opportunity to work, then you begin talking about what they earn or how much they are able to have. But that's the second concern in my view. The primary one being that at least they have something to earn. As to do with the pension and the saving, I think as was explained, which I would agree, is overall it's a healthy thing for the economy. And I will explain it from an economic perspective. That when people, when the country is able to mobilize more savings and deploy those savings to various sectors, that's how you are able to grow. That's how you are able to create more flow of resources in the economy. And you have to, yes, take a pinch, or you could also think of it from an individual perspective. If you can be able to save, you'll be able to deploy those savings for something meaningful, to add value to yourself or to grow yourself from one level to another. So I think it's a give and take. You can never, it's hard at individual level, but also at a national level to have everything. You can't have all to spend, but yet you want also to grow. So I think I would agree with that principle of increasing savings, because we see that the cost of capital is still relatively high in Rwanda, and we need to bring it down and create more resources for private sector to borrow from the financial institutions and the like.
Okay, and in particular, if we look at Q3, how did we see the GDP? What various sectors were the key drivers of the growth that we saw in the quarter?
So for GDP growth, we had a growth of 8.1% for Q3, coming from a growth of 9.8% for Q2, and 9.7% for Q1. So that brought an average of about 9.2% for the three quarters. That compares to a growth, I think, of about 7.7% for the same quarters for 2023. Now, that growth comes from growth across all the key sectors, namely services, industry, and agriculture. Agriculture had a mild growth of 4% compared to the previous quarters. But still 4% is a fair growth for agriculture. Now for services we had a growth of 10%. For industry we had a growth of 8%. For within agriculture, the 4% is attributed to growth of 2% for food crops. So that say in agriculture there are two main components: food crops and export crops. But for exports we had a growth of 16%, and this is mainly driven by increase in exports of coffee. Coffee accounts for a big share of our exports still. So this is a good season for coffee, the last part of the year, between June to October. Whereas for services, we had growth across all the various components of services, whether you talk of transport, retail trade, hotels and restaurants, transportation. For industry, we had specifically a growth in mining and quarrying, where we had several of our main exports increasing in terms of their growth, but also we had a growth of 5% in manufacturing and construction activities. So that's a balanced growth when you talk of industry in terms of all the key components having a growth. The same would be said for services as well. And when we see this growth coming from also almost the same levels for 2023, I think that's why I was summing it to say we are seeing a positive trajectory, and this was meaningful. This is now the kind of growth that begins to really make a difference in people's well-being. It's one thing to have growth for 1 year, and then the next year you are down again. But if you have steady growth over the years, that reaches many people. That translates to improved well-being for a number of people, because it's people who are involved in those various economic activities.
Very interesting. Still on the point that you've just made, looking across the continent, Rwanda is the fastest growing economy, and there has been questions we've seen. The question of, can this positive trajectory, this positive growth, can it be sustained over the years? Even just looking at the key trends that we're seeing long term, the rate at which Rwanda is growing, can it be sustained? And what fundamental policies or enablers have been put in place?
Well, that would be best answered by the Minister of Finance in terms of the strategies and the enablers. But what I can say is that it's possible, because there's room to grow across various sectors. So when you think of growth, there are countries, because of their size and the main key things have been put in place, like roads, like housing, then the added value each year is minimal given where those countries are already. But for developing countries, for countries still in the journey of development, there's room to continue to grow, because there are more needs. The infrastructure needs to be done, housing, then there's productivity of agriculture that needs to keep growing given the growing population. So the potential is there, and once the right resources and interventions are done, I think it's possible. And obviously depending on general stability, whether in the country in terms of various maybe environmental issues or other shocks that happen, keeping other factors constant, the potential is there.
The potential is there. And we saw the National Institute of Statistics, Rwanda, launched the NSDS4. Talk to us about the achievements of the past 3 and what learnings are we taking as we also embarked on the strategy 4?
Yeah, thank you for that. So the National Strategy for Development of Statistics is one which is coordinated by the National Institute of Statistics, but it's a strategy for production and provision of statistics across all sectors. There are main statistics that are produced in the Office of Statistics, but there are other statistics coming across various government institutions. But the law gives the mandate to the National Institute of Statistics to coordinate all of that. So, looking at the past strategy, which was 5 years, from 2019 to 2024, June 2024, there were quite meaningful milestones. One was to do with adoption of big data and data science. It's the first time we adopted those, could call them alternative sources of data. So traditionally, statistics offices have focused on surveys and censuses. You go to the field, ask data. And a bit of administrative systems which exist, let's say the system for health, which captures birth, or system for education. But where technology has evolved, we are seeing alternative sources of data which can be more regular and which can complement a lot what we've been doing. So the last 4 years, we have embarked on that. We have now a data science department at the statistics office, but similar units or functions have been established also across some government institutions, which is to promote more analytics, the value of analytics to complement what you see in a survey is what is being started in the last NSDA 3. And we have been exploring different things like analysis of satellite images to help us understand the performance of agriculture, how weather changes in weather affect productivity of agriculture, but also understand the changes in agriculture patterns, how people are growing different crops and how that is changing. There are other initiatives which we are exploring. So that's one in NSDA 3. And we will continue to do also for NSDS 4 because that was just the beginning, but more is yet to be done. The second one was about capacity building to promote use of data. So over the years, we are considered one of the few countries or statistics offices that have a variety of data, meaning we have statistics across all sectors. Any sector, you'll find statistics: gender, justice, education, health, the economy, various components of the economy. Now, it's one thing to produce the data, and it's one thing for people to really use the data. And one of the challenges we see around that is for people to be comfortable with that data. When they see the labor force, when we say unemployment is at this level, the breakdown is like this, the various sectors, for people to be comfortable with that, they need some training. So we've been doing capacity building. We have a training center here, which the government helped us establish. So we do have trainings for people in education sector, students. We do trainings for those in the academia, the researchers. We do trainings for government institutions, even for the media, for people to be comfortable with this evidence. But we still need to do even more in the next NSDS. So we've been embarking on some things which we even feel the demand is even more to do more, meaning capacity building, awareness for people to be aware of the products we have. We've received meaningful feedback that as much as we produce the reports, but we need to do infographics, summarize some key things, some key takeaways, and share on social media and the like, but also do these kinds of conversations. So thank you for making the time to talk to us, for people to be more aware and cognizant. So I would say capacity building, data science, but also engaging with government to explain the various statistics are some of the key things we are happy with for the last NSDS, which we look forward to carry on in the next NSDS.
Bridging the gap on looking at data analysis as well as data interpretation and having it as a catalyst for the economic growth of the country.
Yes. And one other thing is to see how we make our outputs more user-friendly. So when we produce our reports, how do we make some just few pages of easy to read information that a person like you will look at and understand. You wouldn't have time to go through a detailed report. So those are other capabilities we need to build within our institution.
As we head towards the end of the year, we're in the festive season. We've seen excitement is in the air, and this is a time when retail traders can actually get and maximize, whether if it's promotions. We've come from the period of Black Friday, we've seen Cyber Monday, now the festive seasons. How are we seeing the excitement within the consumers here in Rwanda? How do you expect it to trickle to the economy?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think as someone who has been in Rwanda for a couple of years, it's true, the excitement has been growing around this period over the last maybe 6 years. Some years ago, you wouldn't see much difference around this period in terms of people being excited and going out to spend, shows and things and the like. I would say from an economic perspective, it's a positive thing, because businesses are making money. For consumers, for consumption to happen, it's a good thing, because it will create more revenues to the businesses. Now, if most of the services and products being traded, transacted, are domestically produced, the better. Because then that stays in the economy, as opposed to if most of that spending is on products which are imported. So I think it's a balance of that, people shopping for clothes and the like, and they're spending on food, which is good. They're doing shows. There are shows happening around the country. Every evening there's something happening, excitement, weddings as well. So I think it's a health thing in general for this kind of excitement. And I think the country, given the level of development, you begin to see such things also go to another level. And people are going to be more active, and there will be more ideas around sports, around entertainment, which is overall good. And if it can spread on for, let's say, a month, meaning between December to January, overall that's good for the economy. And I think what we've seen is that it's been picking up over the years.